Introduction to the Post-Apocalyptic Search and Rescue Team. www.zhaoshuyuan.com. In the post-apocalyptic crisis, survivors are scattered in underground shelters around the world. The interim coalition government has organized search and rescue teams to return to their home planet and save humanity. Qin Hua is one of them. What kind of danger and challenges will he and his companions encounter on their never-met Earth's home planet? The underground world with turbulent currents and mysterious clouds. https://www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Chapter 1 Hope Arkansas. You are listening at novelfull.audio. My name is Qin Hua, and people who are familiar with me call me Ah Hua. I was born and raised on Mars, and I am a native Martian. But the education I received from a young age was that I, along with my companions, and everyone on the Ark base, were all authentic Earthlings. Yes, we come from Earth. That was 40 years ago, when Earth was subjected to continuous impacts from the asteroid belt, with the energy equivalent to detonating billions of tons of nuclear bombs. The impact was so extensive and massive that it could destroy more than half of Earth's life. Although scientists have calculated the exact time and orbit of the impact in advance, in the limited time, what our ancestors could do was to do everything possible to reduce losses and ensure the continuation of the spark of human civilization. And this limited time is only 3.5 years, as stated in history textbooks. All technological means have been exhausted, and all methods have been employed. For example, using nuclear weapons to bombard the asteroid belt, but this method was not successful. On the contrary, the losses were enormous. On the basis of the existing Mars Ark base, the scale has been wildly expanded, and countless aircraft have begun unprecedented interstellar migration. However, for Earth, which has a population of nearly 10 billion, this is undoubtedly a drop in the bucket, and less than 1 in 10,000 people are fortunate enough to board the migration spacecraft. A more realistic approach is to avoid the impact point and establish dungeons and shelters on Earth, which will be planned and coordinated by the Temporary Human Governance Alliance. So humans and my ancestors began excavating underground structures in every corner of the Earth. The depth of the underground city is no less than 1 kilometer, and the scale can accommodate at least 200,000 people. The depth of the shelter cannot be less than 600 meters, which makes the scale much smaller, usually accommodating 10,000 to 20,000 people. However, the advantage of the shelter lies in its quantity. The ancestors had to complete the construction of tens of thousands of dungeons and countless shelters within a very limited time. At that time, the difficulty was not in the design drawings and construction resources, but in mature ecological technology means, such as stable ecological circulation and self-cleaning systems. It can be imagined that at that time, the ecological cycle system of many underground cities was quite primitive and rough, which was worrying, let alone small shelters. The ecological self-cleaning and recycling system in the Martian base is now very mature and complete. It only requires a small amount of energy to keep the entire system running smoothly for over 100 years. The system is extremely complex, including simulating the atmosphere, air regeneration and self-cleaning systems, water circulation systems, lighting and power circulation systems, temperature and humidity regulation systems, and so on. Each Ark base is equivalent to a super-large ecological farm, which is already spread throughout the eastern plains of the southern hemisphere of Mars. But no matter how many farms there are, they can only accommodate a limited population. Moreover, this is just a temporary base for humans. At the most coincidental point, it has become an extraterrestrial refuge for humans, but we need a larger living space. It's time to go home. All of this knowledge comes from my education after birth, including my parents, classrooms, books, and even friends. I haven't seen the mother planet Earth of humanity with my own eyes, but now we're back. My friends and I are from Ark of Hope 1, which is the first time in 40 years that humans from the Mars Ark base have returned to their home planet after the Earth disaster. Our team consists of 11 people and is part of the 6th search team of the 3rd Combat Squadron of the military, also known as the Doomsday Search and Rescue Team. The purpose of the hope that the Ark will return to Earth is to conduct a large-scale disaster assessment, verify detector data, search for other missing detectors, provide feedback on the reasons, establish a forward base, prepare for the next large-scale human return home, and also search for survivors. Yes, survivors, this is a very heavy topic. Although we don't like the name Doomsday Search and Rescue Team, each of us understands our mission. Over the past 40 years, countless dungeons and shelters have gradually severed contact with the Mars Ark base, which is a very bad situation, and probes are unable to provide an answer. But based on the worst geological hazard assessment, the most authoritative experts combined with the data sent back by surviving detectors, an unacceptable judgment has been made that these missing areas may no longer have human survivors. As of the day when Ark 1 departs, the number of dungeons and shelters that can maintain contact with the Ark base will not exceed 1 slap, which is a very disappointing result. It is said that their situation is quite bad. The ecosystem has collapsed, and mutated organisms are everywhere. They are often attacked and plundered, and they dare not leave the dungeon. They lack food and water, lack weapons for self-defense, and have no hope left. Half of these heavy news is semi-public, but there is still a lot that this damn old man around me told me. His surname is Lin, and many people call him Dr. Lin. This old man is already 68 years old, and I don't know where he heard the news. This kind of rumor is strictly controlled by the military and may be sent to court. I also don't know how he infiltrated the search and rescue team. In short, everything about this old man is strange and mysterious. I hate him because he occupies a spot in our team. Just think about it, with such an age and a powerless physique, when facing mutant creatures, I'm worried that I'll curse him at that time. The first batch of landing on our home planet is a source of pride and honor for each and every one of us, who has put in at least 5 to 7 years of hard training for it. After learning that I had finally been selected for the roster, I was so excited that I didn't sleep all night. Firstly, I was excited, and secondly, I felt extremely heavy pressure. In the words of instructor Zoc, we were not going on an interstellar trip, but to excavate the bones of our ancestors. Zoc's thoughts are usually extreme, so he is too unqualified to be an instructor. He calls himself a Spaniard when he meets people. His hometown is in the beautiful Iberian Peninsula, rather than the damned Ark Base No. 2. Go to the bookstore www.zhaozuyuan.com to go to his mother. Indeed, to my surprise, from the moment I stepped out of the spaceship, I was stunned by the apocalyptic scene on Earth. The sky is gray and it is difficult to see sunlight. The air is filled with a mixture of acid, sulfur, and other complex odors. Various dust particles mix in the air, and smelling too much can be suffocating. The land presents a large area of cracking, with the soil being reddish-brown and the cracks being black, while further away, as far as the eye can see, the rock and soil are grayish-black. Given the atmospheric conditions of the Earth, the human body is not suitable for prolonged exposure to polluted air. Therefore, the professional organization of the Alliance has specially designed a combat protective suit for us, which is sturdy and lightweight. The surface of the clothing can automatically filter harmful gases like pores, and the interlayer provides emergency supply and circulation space. There is a small metal jar connected to the helmet, which is the supply equipment. Although this device can only provide a short supply of half an hour at a time, it can be cycled repeatedly and has a lifespan of about 200 starts, making it very practical and advanced. The temperature on the Earth's surface is not as extreme as imagined. According to official data, at least the characteristics before the impact disaster have been maintained. Throughout the year, the extreme temperatures on major land areas increase or decrease by within 35 degrees Celsius. At least before our team set off, I hadn't seen any decent vegetation, everywhere was bare and not much better than the Mars that I had turned a blind eye to. Perhaps we landed in the wrong place, without seeing any buildings or even ruins. In short, the current Earth is vastly different from what I see in textbooks and images. Blue skies and white clouds, green mountains and rivers, jungles and grasslands, huge urban clusters, magnificent buildings, and so on may only exist on Earth 40 years ago. Chapter 2. Our Team. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hope Arkansas 1 is incredibly massive, at least larger than the largest space fortress I have seen in the data. It can be visually compared that 20 old-fashioned 100,000-ton ocean aircraft carriers are no match for the volume of a space fortress. It can be imagined that the size of the Ark of Hope already has the prototype of an interstellar battleship. The excessively large volume will face many constraints and difficulties when passing through the atmosphere, and the consequences are unpredictable, so it can only stay in outer space. The first landing mission was completed by dozens of small spacecraft. There are also Arks 2 and 3 like this, which will be ready to depart from Mars one after another after our work is successful. And our landing point is set in the Yangtze River Delta in Eastern Asia, formerly the northern suburbs of Qing'an City. The reason for choosing such a landing site is mainly determined by the synchronous orbit. In addition, good geological conditions and close proximity to the underground city are also important factors. The official code name of this underground city is C.086, and data shows that it once accommodated nearly 250,000 refugees. There are 3 shelters in the shape of a pinion around it, which also accommodate 50,000 refugees. It is one of the few underground cities that has had contact with the Mars base in the past year. Represented by the Earth's coordinate system, the landing point of the Ark is not more than 80 kilometers away from the dungeon in a straight line, but the coordinate points are static and theoretical, and the complex surface conditions are actual and beyond imagination. Hope Arkansas 1 carried a large number of personnel, supplies, equipment, preparing for a long-term stay. This is an unprecedented project and an unprecedented battle. We face too many uncertain factors, but we have a firm will, confidence in finding survivors, and confidence in returning to our home planet. This is what our commander and platoon leader said. He thought it wasn't bold enough, but later he couldn't find a suitable vocabulary, so he was careless. The entire Ark 1 includes nearly 800 professionals, with military and quasi-military personnel occupying the majority due to the crisis situation in the dungeon and shelter. The 3rd Combat Unit of the military has a total of 300 combat units, including about 200 soldiers and 100 types of combat and auxiliary robots. Although the overall quantity is not large, equipped with various advanced weapons and equipment, the combat effectiveness of the entire squadron is exceptionally strong, which is also what the commander said. Although at the Ark base, apart from various exercises, we have not fought any battles, even on a small scale. A quarter of the engineering and logistics personnel are mainly responsible for quickly establishing a forward base after landing. That is a reinforced concrete defense facility embedded in the surface, similar to a connected fortress, which is semi-permanent and has a simple ecological cycle system. As a base function, its various conditions are relatively complete. These engineering and logistics personnel have also undergone rigorous quasi-military training, and can quickly become combat personnel in crisis situations. Therefore, they both belong to the leadership of our leader, Colonel Su Chixiong, who is also the 3rd person in the 3rd Combat Squadron. In addition, there are also a considerable number of medical staff and scientists who have their own missions. The automation level of the Ark is very high, so there are not many crew members, except for those who pilot the landing spacecraft. There are less than 10 people left. The 11 spacecraft that landed earlier successfully arrived at the designated location and landed safely. The second batch was a bit unlucky when a logistics supply spacecraft collided with a mountain and crashed. I don't know what happened, but an emergency search team has rushed to investigate. Scientists conducted a relatively simple geological and atmospheric disaster assessment within a radius of 100 kilometers from the location where we landed, confirming that all atmospheric indicators and temperature conditions were normal, and that the harm of surface radiation to human activities did not exceed the predicted values. As a result, various work quickly began. What we need to do is to search for a range of 50 kilometers on foot, ensure safety, and then establish outposts in different directions. Secondly, it is important to quickly establish contact with the underground city, clarify the difficulties and dangers they are facing, and jointly develop search and rescue plans. The previous tasks belong to our search and rescue team, while the later tasks can only be handled by the command center on the Ark and Shuo. When more than 10 of our search and rescue teams set off one after another, the engineering and logistics personnel had already started the construction work of the forward base. I think when we come back, there should be delicious food and warm bedding waiting for us. The personnel configuration of the search and rescue team is more focused on military force, with 7 combat personnel, 2 medical staff, 1 logistics personnel, and 1 scientist, and equipped with a multifunctional universal robot. Each team is equipped with this standard configuration. Of course, our 6th team is an exception. Not only is the scientist an old man, but the combination of 7 men and 4 women overall feels like the weakest team in terms of combat effectiveness. However, apart from me, no one seems to complain. Our team's search area is located north of the city center of Lauchingen, which is close to Mount Lu according to the old version of the map. The latest digital map returned by the detector shows that the surface condition and geological structure here have not changed significantly compared to 30 years ago, making it a relatively safe area. It may also be based on this consideration that our 6th team has such a weak personnel configuration. The C.086 dungeon is located 25 kilometers northeast of the old city, and the 2nd search team is also within this range. Unlike us, they need to detour northeast to enter the old city, while our team enters directly from the south, making the search task relatively easy. As the saying goes, working together is not tiring for men and women, so my complaint lasted for 10 minutes from the beginning. After all, with 4 young women accompanying me, my spirit was still strong. Although everyone dared not laugh or laugh due to military discipline, except for Professor Lin, the team was composed of young people who often gathered for training together. They all had familiar faces and whispered a few words, and soon became indistinguishable from each other. Our captain's name is Gung Tao. He is tall and powerful, but not just a guy with well-developed limbs. He is a weapon expert and geographer in our team. Especially when it comes to the surface topography of Earth 40 years ago, he is almost familiar with it. In all the assessments of electronic and simulated sand tables, Gung Tao almost always ranks first. Although he is also a native born on Mars, it does not hinder his longing and love for Earth. In addition, this guy likes to dance and write, and it is said that his hands are so wet when singing. Among the 7 combatants, there were 2 girls named Yuan Ku. She was born like a flower and had a few freckles on her face, which was a very attractive girl. However, no one could have imagined that she was the assassination expert among the 7 of us. She had rarely failed in previous combat training and exercises. She was definitely not a cold beauty. Although she didn't talk much, she was very easygoing and easy to get along with. Another girl, we call her Black Rose. Although roses are a rare plant in the Ark base on Mars, we were fortunate enough to plant 2 around our training camp. When the flowers bloomed in full bloom, they were indeed beautiful and charming, with a hint of primitive wildness. Black Rose, also known as Lilita, is a mixed-race person with dark skin, moderate height, and an excellent figure. It is described as a bestseller in popular slang, with explosive muscles but delicate and sexy. Black Rose is very good at unarmed combat and likes cold weapons, but her temperament is a bit strange. She has a hot temper like a raging beast, but once she calms down, she is very likable. But I rarely talk to Black Rose, because I can't understand her personality. In the past, when I was training, I joked too much and suffered a big loss, which can be said to be embarrassing in public and difficult to speak of. But I didn't hold a grudge against her, just kept a distance. I also rarely talk to Yuan Ku because it's difficult to get on the top spot when paying attention, and over time, I lose my sharpness. Not long after the team set off, I had a conversation with the medical girl who was temporarily transferred, but unfortunately, after a short chat, I was caught up by the thugs. This guy was like a wagging husky, circling between the two girls, silly and busy, without considering my feelings at all. The thug's name is Hudson, he is a tall man and his parents are Danish. He is honest and straightforward, with a bit of a long brain, but he is also good at boasting and has a great market among girls. So I was quickly pushed aside, and the captain asked me to take care of the supplies on the multifunctional robot. I simply walked to the end of the team and accompanied Professor Lin. Chapter 3 Seeing Green. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, our only large-scale equipment for multifunctional robots, also known as robot cars, can carry cargo and undergo multiple transformations. It is called transformers and belongs to non-combat units. This object can be decomposed into two humanoid machines, capable of walking and reconnaissance. In times of crisis, it can release high-voltage electricity for self-defense or be combined to form a small mountain bike, carrying 1 ton of supplies. With this device, outdoor marching is very convenient. To be honest, my complaint stems from Professor Lin, more precisely from his age and the negative news he brought me. Besides, it's actually difficult for me to find a reason to dislike him. On the contrary, I have a lot to say to him. Mr. Lin is knowledgeable and like an encyclopedia to me. He is the only Earthling among us. Yes, perhaps it is because of this mentality that I deliberately distinguish categories, which is actually quite ridiculous. Gung Tao did not let Professor Lin serve as a guide for the purpose of protection. Considering his age and physical condition, asking me to take care of the supplies is actually just a saying, taking care of the old man is the essence. Have you ever been to Qingyan? I mean, when you were on Earth. To be precise, I haven't, but I have been to several cities around it, all of which are big cities, such as Hefei, Nanjing, and Hangzhou. Is the big city in your impression the one we often watch in documentaries? How does it compare to our Ark base? It is much more beautiful than what is depicted in the documentary, with a large scale, high degree of modernization, towering buildings, and convenient transportation. The Ark base cannot be compared to it. The old man was very proud, with deep nostalgia in his memories. I also longed for it, but unfortunately, in front of me was the dry land, a barren land. The old man's emotions plummeted with my silence, but soon returned to normal. He was not as weak as I had imagined. After walking 5 kilometers, there was no obvious feeling of difficulty, which impressed me. For the first 5 kilometers, our team seemed to be wandering and taking a walk, because the detection results of the small drone showed that there was no danger within a radius of dozens of miles, and even very few living creatures were found. The 7th and 2nd search teams of our neighbors were also in the same situation. The only frustrating thing is that the information and instructions we have been waiting for to command the spaceship have not appeared yet, which also means that they have been unable to contact the C.086 dungeon. There is also a shelter named CB.1991 near our team, with a straight line distance of no more than 20 kilometers. Unfortunately, this mission does not include searching for the shelter. Professor Lin is talking to me while carefully observing the terrain along the way. He occasionally stops to collect soil samples with his small shovel, and behind him is a backpack with rows of small bottles. This 5-kilometer road has already filled 2 rows. In addition, Mr. Lin often takes out his camera to take photos, or takes out something similar to a transparent protective cover, facing the wind, as if measuring the wind speed, and as if collecting air. In short, I can't understand and I'm too lazy to ask. When the old man does all of this, I usually don't disturb him. Geological hazard assessment is his job task, and in addition to being responsible for his safety, I also need to urge him to speed up at the appropriate time to avoid leaving the team. But the team suddenly came to a stop, and according to the order given by Gung Tao, everyone remained vigilant. Due to an unexpected situation, the drone that was released again was lost. That is a guy even smaller than a backpack, with a fast speed and extremely small targets in the air that are not easily captured. Even in a crash, there will be continuous short-frequency signal transmission unless it is instantly burned to ashes. The other news is even more serious. Our 7th search team, which is adjacent to us, has also lost contact. Gung Tao has confirmed with the captain of the 2nd team, but they are also unable to contact the 7th team. Except for the thugs' indifferent demeanor, each of us was somewhat restless. We scattered, each occupying a hidden position, gazing at everything around us. As far as we can see, except for the slopes and rocks, there is only this extremely dilapidated and cracked asphalt road under our feet. Professor Lin said that this road was a product of at least 50 or 60 years ago. When a disaster occurs, due to the continuous impact of multiple asteroids, the impact surface is very scattered and wide, with a certain range in both the eastern and western hemispheres, from the Eurasian continent to the Pacific, and then to the North American continent and the Atlantic. Most of the impact points are basically around 31 degrees north latitude, and the southern hemisphere has not suffered a direct impact, but subsequent secondary disasters should not be underestimated. According to the repeatedly verified satellite maps, there was no direct impact point in the Qing'an area, so the direct impact was not severe, which is also the main reason why the surface condition still maintains its original state. The road surface is covered with thick cracks. Professor Lin believes that there have been several major floods in this area, which have damaged some of the roadbed, but overall it has been maintained well. I followed Professor Lin's fingers to observe, and indeed I could vaguely recognize a trace of the flood after it had spread. Behind us was the Yangtze River, and it was normal for floods to occur. I believed Professor Lin's words and felt much more at ease. After reporting the situation to the Joint Commander, Gung Tao finally received a response. The search task remained unchanged, and the situation of the 7th Squadron was handed over to the emergency response team. In addition, the squadron has dispatched 2 general-purpose electronic reconnaissance drones, which will conduct precise carpet-style reconnaissance of our area and share information in real time. So we continued on our journey. Ahead of us were small low mountains and hills. After passing through this area, we were on the outskirts of the old city area that used to be away from the city. Under Gung Tao's urging, we accelerated our pace of travel. The team quickly left the road, and after turning a mountain beam, almost everyone exclaimed in surprise. Although Gung Tao was angry, he did not scold everyone because he was also excited. Following closely behind this small mountain, there is actually a lush forest from the foot of the mountain to halfway up. Looking for a book garden, www.zhaoshuyuan.com, and the mountains further away have a larger area of green vegetation coverage. Even sparse weeds and shrubs have appeared near our feet. We finally saw green, and the earth was no longer filled with desolate yellow and brown earth. It was not until then that I believed that the pictures, textbooks, promotional videos, and so on that I had seen since I started studying at the Ark base were not exaggerated or exaggerated. They truly existed. Our green earth is the star of life that nurtured human civilization. Everyone was very excited, unable to suppress their inner excitement. A few cheers were actually too unfair to herself. Yuan Ku was the first to run out, followed closely by husky-like thugs, who were eager to embrace the green. We were all one of them. Stop! Gung Tao suddenly shouted and took out an automatic weapon, which was a high-energy laser gun. The bullet fired was a scorching laser beam, which could easily penetrate half a finger-thick steel plate within an effective distance. At this moment, Gung Tao's muzzle was aimed at the back of the thug. We are all well-trained special operations personnel, and being targeted by this weapon can be extremely sensitive. The thug immediately stopped there like a puppet, and Yuan Ku quickly reacted and obediently stopped. The two of them were very embarrassed, while those of us who wanted to run but didn't have time were gloating and preparing to watch the excitement. Strangely, Gung Tao didn't get angry, but reiterated his marching discipline in front of everyone and warned that if such foolish actions were repeated, he would not hesitate to shoot. Gung Tao is a person who always speaks and acts, and no one dares to doubt his warning. Therefore, we extremely conflicted and calmed down, and the team stood still. Gung Tao's face was very unpleasant, as if he was not angry, but had some bad feeling. Chapter 4. Virtual Shock 1 Scene. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. We have deployed an unmanned reconnaissance plane and 3 compact electronic dogs to explore the path ahead, mainly targeting the forest and entering complex terrain areas. These reconnaissance methods are routine and necessary. Moreover, from various channels, including detectors and information exchange with dungeons, it can be seen that there are many mutated creatures on Earth, many of which are full of aggression and danger. Although we did not see them along the way, it does not mean that danger does not exist. The team carried a total of 3 small unmanned aerial vehicles, as well as several reconnaissance electronic flying insects and electronic dogs, all equipped with high-definition camera and synchronous transmission functions, and the communication channel was very stable, making mature quantum communication technology difficult to interfere with. We watched as these little things gradually faded away, while Gung Tao and his deputy, Master Mai, closely watched the display screen in their hands. Professor Lin, on the other hand, was spirited as he observed a small cluster of green vegetation not far away. This emerald green appeared exceptionally unique and precious in the vast and desolate land. I was about to approach and ask what kind of plant it was. At least I had never seen such a lovely creature in the big farm at the Ark base before, when suddenly I heard a faint and blurry sound coming from afar, clattering, yet quite abrupt in this quiet and frightening wilderness. Sitting on the ground, Master Mike suddenly jumped up, and Gung Tao also put down his display screen. With a serious expression, he murmured, "It's a Sigma Dragon Tongue rifle." His self-talk immediately made everyone nervous. The sound in the distance was indeed gunfire, and every combat member of the search team was equipped with the full set of new infantry equipment, including a standard laser pistol and a traditional Sigma Dragon Tongue automatic rifle. This type of rifle is the standard configuration for every soldier in the search team, with fast firing rate, strong firepower, and outstanding individual suppression ability. There are also 6 pocket Type 2 high explosive grenades, 2 highly destructive annihilation grenades, and so on. Gung Tao immediately adjusted the channel to call the second team, and unexpectedly quickly connected. The other party was far away from us, and it turned out that we were separated by a 7th team, so they did not hear gunshots, and there were no other abnormalities in the surrounding area. That's strange. Is it the person from the search team? Or is it to say that the members of the 7th team did not lose contact, but only the communication equipment was damaged? Gung Tao did not guess randomly, but quickly fed back the intelligence to the command center and changed the course of the drone that had already entered the forest, turning around and flying further away towards the sound of gunfire. Master Mike quickly followed the commands, while Gung Tao instructed everyone to prepare for battle, which may sound exaggerated, but in such an unknown environment, it is necessary to maintain considerable caution. What is this? Master Mai suddenly let out a strange cry, and everyone looked at him strangely. The servant handed the display screen in his hand to Gung Tao, who looked at the screen for a while and seemed confused. Finally, he handed the screen to everyone for recognition. It seems like an animal. Nonsense. I don't see it, it's just the shadow hidden by the branches. If you don't know how to read, don't talk nonsense. This is clearly an animal. Look at the virtual shadow on the nearby leaves, it indicates that this thing is moving rapidly. Why didn't you say you trembled during filming? This is a synchronized image. The screen finally reached my hand. To be honest, I really can't see clearly. The forest is very dense, and the green is very pleasant. Occasionally, there are shadows that they insist are animals, and I can't help it. Everyone had different opinions and was still arguing loudly, indicating that Gung Tao was very irritable. However, at this moment, the screen suddenly went black, and after a while, it entered the restart mode. Everyone has a very bad premonition that after our previous drone went missing, the signal interruption was this reaction. After the startup was completed, Master Mai switched channels continuously and finally unbelievably told Gung Tao that not only the drone, but also the 3 electronic dogs that entered the forest had lost contact. Gung Taohua stood up suddenly. The incident was eerie, and he didn't want to wait for feedback from the command center anymore. He ordered the thug and Tian Jinhe to investigate the forest with him on the spot. Master Mai and our remaining 4 combatants stayed in place to protect the doctor and Professor Lin. We stared intently at the 3 of them slowly moving towards the forest, each of whom was extremely nervous. At the moment when Tian Jinhe first entered the forest, I saw that the body of Black Rose had already arched into the front of the attacking civet cat, almost with long hair standing upright all over. Master Mai's right hand kept rubbing against his gun stock, seeming to be searching for a feeling. Yuan Ko looked the most calm, but the hand holding the gun was trembling slightly. 2 young doctors covered their eyes with both hands, but I knew they were secretly looking through their fingertips, and even Professor Lin's eyes widened. I'm not sure what he can see with his dimly-eyed eyes. The straight line distance exceeds at least 400 meters, and ordinary people don't rely on optical mirrors to assist. In front of them is a paste. Each fighter in the group is equipped with a single soldier tactical helmet, with a modular design and embedded system combination, which is quite practical. For example, embedded optical mirrors, anti-material sights, and digital imaging automatic transmission and sensor systems can be used for data sharing among team members, and even across groups. Of course, all data exchange relies on the high-power microelectronic quantum processors in the command center. If the processors fail, more than half of the visual nerves of the entire combat squadron will be destroyed. There was no movement in the forest, and then Gung Tao also entered. The trees were not tall, and we could vaguely see his cautiously moving figure, leaving only the thug outside. This guy is a bit tiger. With his originally half-squatting guard posture, he actually stood up casually, looked around, and found the book garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com, which was full of freshness. Everyone forgot to breathe, and the unpredictable danger seemed to jump out of their throat. But there was still no movement, and then the thug received instructions to enter the forest. 500 meters away, we stared at this forest but became increasingly nervous, feeling that the string in our minds was about to break. I don't know how time passes by minute by second, but the flesh on my shoulder must have been pinched blue by the old man. When this old man is nervous, his strength is so strong that I can't even shout. I can only curse softly, "Damn old man, can't you pinch yourself?" Professor Lin hurriedly let go and smiled apologetically at me, but his face was even worse than crying. "There's really something wrong with Lin, I'm too nervous," he said. "What's wrong with it?" "It's pretty good, pretty. This forest is not small, but you can't even see a flying bird. Not only can't you see it, there isn't even a bird's call. Do you think it's strange? Who told you that there must be birds in the forest? And can you see birds with your old eyes?" Although I am not convinced, I know in my heart that what the old man said is reasonable. Not only is it common knowledge learned in textbooks, but even the artificial forest in the Ark base has some birds kept inside, with green trees providing shade and flocks of flying birds. What a beautiful nature, but everyone knows that it is not the legendary nature. Don't talk nonsense. Master Mai turned around and glared angrily. The 2 troublemakers, myself and the old man, were feeling guilty and quickly lowered their heads. However, the extremely tense atmosphere was also disrupted by this disturbance, and all our partners cast disdainful looks at us. The atmosphere was awkward. Fortunately, not long after, Gung Tao was the first to leave the forest and sent a safety signal back to Master Mai. Everyone breathed a long sigh of relief and was in a false alarm. Naturally, no one cared about the little incident that the old man and I had just caused trouble. Chapter 5. Gunshots ring out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, everyone quickly gathered, and although Gung Tao still had a serious expression, he agreed that everyone could get close to nature and take a photo by the edge of the forest, hugging a tree. Other things were not allowed because the source of gunfire was still unclear, the danger was not lifted, and time was tight. I held a small tree with a bowl-wide mouth, sniffed the fragrance of its bark hard, and then lost interest. Gung Tao and Master Mai muttered to each other, holding a perfectly intact electronic dog in his hand. This was their only harvest in the forest, and the other two inexplicably disappeared. It is urgent to identify the source of the gunshot. Gung Tao gave everyone a total of 1 minute, and the broken electronic dog was not dismantled for the time being. Everyone quickly formed a team and set off. This time, it was entirely through manual reconnaissance, and the remaining auxiliary equipment was very valuable. It will no longer be used unless absolutely necessary. We accelerated our pace, almost jogging forward. Tian Jinhe, as a temporary scout, set off early and had already formed a large section of the team. But I began to complain again, holding the old man behind me and wanting to curse. This old man didn't have enough energy when he needed to, and used his energy when he shouldn't have. The old man didn't retort because he couldn't even catch his breath and didn't have time to vent his anger with me. Instead, he was inexplicably glared at by the Black Rose, who turned around. I didn't argue with women, but for some reason, I couldn't express my complaints. Along the way, there were hills and slopes, and green weeds began to grow. To the east and west, the black-brown mountains looked like a dog skin ointment. The scenery was not pleasant, but it also excited us because this is the true nature. Before the impact, the earth should have been hundreds of times more beautiful than it is now. There is a slightly higher mountain ahead, and the source of gunfire should be nearby. We quickly ran out of the quiet and open mountains, and after firing a Sigma rifle without a sound suppressor, the sound of the primer could be heard 100 meters away. Tian Jinhe has become a small dot. After climbing over the mountains, he quickly disappeared from our sight. For some reason, each of us became nervous again. The thug had already rushed to the second place, followed closely by the Black Rose. Gung Tao did not intend to restrain them, and everyone focused on Tian Jinhe and behind the mountain. The old man finally dragged me down. He seemed to have a slight asthma, and his throat was like pulling a bellows. He was gasping for breath and couldn't take a step. How did this damn physical examination get him onto the spaceship? I carried the old man on my back and climbed the mountain, cursing and cursing. Although I had rigorous training experience and a strong physique, I still watched helplessly as the robotic car moved further and further away from us. The search team is on the brink of battle, and the robot car is also divided into 2 independent robots. All supplies are evenly distributed among each person. Lao Lin and I are very unlucky, as he cannot enjoy the privilege of riding a car, which makes me even more unlucky. Gung Tao deliberately asked Yuan Ku to slow down, mainly to take care of me and Professor Lin, but I always feel hot on my face. It's obviously embarrassing to let a girl take care of me. A series of gunshots rang out, this time exceptionally clear. On the other side of the mountain, Tian Jinhe encountered danger. This is almost the first and foremost preconceived idea of each of us. The thugs, Black Roses, and others have already climbed over the mountain, and Yuan Ku is also anxious. She dropped a word to protect Professor Lin and ran away. I had the urge to roll my eyes and spit, but in the end, I chose to curse. Anyway, the old man didn't have time to talk back, but there was no gunfire coming from then on. By the time I carried the old man to the mountaintop, it seemed like the accident had already ended. At the lower part of the mountainside, there were several tall shrubs. The Maishifu and thugs were on patrol, while Gung Tao and others were inspecting a dark object. Tian Jinhe was also present, and there were no unexpected incidents. At least every member of our team was safe, which made me breathe a sigh of relief. Recalling the look on my face when I saw that dark thing, I was so scared that I was at a loss. I swore that all of them had intentions. I helped Professor Lin down the mountain, and each of them intentionally or unintentionally blocked the key part of this thing. When I approached and saw its true appearance, I was really scared. It was a mouse the size of an adult goat. I have never seen gray mice, and there are no wild mice in the farm at the Ark base, but there are live white mice that can be used for digging training, little by little. The knowledge in books tells me that a normal adult mouse is not larger than an ordinary mineral water bottle, but what I see in front of me is that this thing called a mouse is really too big. It has thick limbs, a round body, and a tail that is like a whip. Its head is shaped like a long triangle, and a pair of round ears that stand up are the only non-annoying parts, making it easy to remember the image of a cartoon mouse. But this huge rat's face is too ferocious and ugly. Go to www.zhaozuiyuan.com, especially the two scarlet eyes. They are like the legendary devil's eyes of hell. The two tusks show their lips and look very sharp. The most strange thing is that this big guy has a pair of fleshy wings, which are short and ugly, like two folding fans inserted in his body. It's hard to imagine that it can fly with this pair of things. This reminds me of bats, but bats don't have such a huge physique. This guy's body is covered in bullet holes, and the blood flowing out is dark purple, giving people a very uncomfortable feeling. We can't understand this thing, but our hearts unconsciously become gloomy. The Master Mouse was handed over to Professor Lin and two beautiful doctors. Can we figure out if it's not a concern for us? Gung Tao suspects that the 7th team may have been attacked by this monster. There are many fresh traces in the bushes and exposed soil, and we have a 50% chance of confirming Gung Tao's speculation. The question is whether or not to go. In order to figure out the source of the gunfire, we have deviated from our search area, and the command center has not given further instructions or feedback. The previous orders did not involve us in the search for the 7th Squadron. They have already dispatched a dedicated search team, but where is this damn team? With a loud crash, a strong stench suddenly filled my nose, and I was startled. Although I didn't participate in the discussion or guard, I didn't notice the actions of the old man in Yilan. This old man and those two beautiful women actually tore open the huge rat's belly. 3 people were all splattered with blood, and they were all frightened. The people around us even covered their mouths and couldn't help but vomit. It was so bloody that half of the human leg and a head that had digested most of the body fell out of the rat's stomach pouch, making it difficult to distinguish their appearance. Yuan Ku immediately ran to a nearby big vomit and vomited in pleasure, while my stomach was also displeased. I chose to run in the opposite direction to vomit. Chapter 6. The 7th Team Lost. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. After a moment of chaos, everyone quieted down slightly. Although we were known as Special Operations personnel in the 3rd Combat Squadron, it was the first time we had seen such a bloody scene. Physical discomfort comes second, while psychological discomfort is extremely unbearable. Although we have seen countless materials and simulated countless combat scenes during years of training, we have never had such a vivid and realistic impression. Preliminary speculation suggests that this is a mutated organism induced by severe nuclear radiation, which should be a variant of an ordinary field mouse. From the remaining synthetic fiber fabric in the stomach sac, it can be inferred that the victim was our companion. Professor Lin's words were heavy, and the clouds were thick in the hearts of each of us listeners. The vitality of this thing is very tenacious. With 11 bullet holes, I found 9 deformed warheads. Oda, did you just say you fired 6 bullets? Lin said this and turned his head to look at Tian Jinhe, who nodded seriously. That means before Oda, there were other teammates who hit this guy. The 2 bullet holes were penetrating wounds, and the bullet heads should have flown out of the body. The 9 bullet heads stirred up this guy's main organs into paste, but he still had the ability to run so far. Mr. Lin's words are very clear. We should have other teammates who are likely alive, such as the person who injured the Shuo mouse before Tianjinha. If we follow the traces, we are likely to make significant discoveries, and there is no need to verify Gung Tao's speculation. Everyone's gaze turned to Gung Tao and Master Mai, both of whom frowned tightly, but they still reported the situation to the command center according to the procedure and issued an alarm. While waiting for a response, we had nothing to say. We didn't know if it was due to nervousness, shock, fear, or other reasons, silently watching old Lin busy. With the help of 2 girls, Lao Lintu carefully sorted out the remains of his deceased colleagues, found a container to hold, and waited for the command center to send support personnel to transport them away. At this moment, I felt ashamed and couldn't compare my psychological resilience to the other 2 girls. I wanted to go and help, but it was full of contradictions and struggles. I believe that there were many who had the same mentality as me. Finally, we received instructions from the command center to temporarily suspend our search mission and instead participate in the search for the whereabouts of the 7th team. The search team that arrived at the designated location half an hour ago has lost contact and is also searching for the target. At the same time, the command center ordered the 2nd and 9th teams to approach us. This command is undoubtedly a sizable stink bomb, causing many people to complain. It is unbelievable that the response of the command center is so slow and sluggish. Especially if the 2nd and 9th teams were to approach us later, it meant there was no follow-up support, so the complaint turned into anger. I had a lot of conversations with the thugs, and later Lao Lin said that I looked like a resentful woman at the time. He finally seized the opportunity to avenge me with 1 arrow. The command center may also have an unavoidable hidden situation. When searching for and rescuing our brothers, what's there to complain about? Gung Tao's words silenced everyone. The team commander is also a commander with absolute authority. If he dares to disobey orders, he has the right to punishment. In special circumstances during wartime, he even has the right to execute, which is by no means a joke. Everyone counted their equipment and hastily marked the container containing the remains of their colleagues, leaving the mutated giant rat in place as a warning to the following brothers. Still led by Tianjinha as the lead scout, Black Rose was the expert in traces, following closely behind. The rest of us maintained the formation of scattered soldiers before the battle, slowly exploring along the traces. Searching and rescuing survivors, becoming colleagues in searching and rescuing oneself, is not ironic. It means that our home planet Earth, after experiencing the catastrophe 40 years ago, is full of danger and variables. If we cannot rediscover her, we will face great difficulties. The traces of the presence of the giant mouse are very obvious, almost effortless. We quickly tracked for a long distance, and along the way, we also found blood stains. Judging from the smell and color, it was the giant mouse. Mr. Lin analyzed it to be very similar. This mutated creature ran around with injuries and ended up hitting Tianjinha. We have passed through 2 hills in a row, with more and more green plants along the way, but no one is as excited as before because the traces on the surface are becoming more and more scattered. Many of them are from our own people, with imprints of lightweight mountain boots, and even the unique narrow track marks of machine vehicle combinations, which are very obvious. Mr. Lin's face became increasingly serious. He was the only team member among us who had been indulging in promiscuity along the way, constantly picking leaves, fruits, and observing roots and stems. Many of them were even carefully preserved by him as specimens. From time to time, he would mutter to me, "The leaves of holly have mutated and are almost growing into banana fans. Have you ever seen a jujube tree? The dates are delicious, sweet and delicious. Look at this thing again, it's small like mung beans, and it's still a mature fruit that has mutated. Mr. Lin is an expert in astrophysics, not only able to make cameo appearances as a forensic expert, but also seems to be proficient in encyclopedia knowledge. I have generally learned and heard of the plants he talks about, and some have even seen them in the farms at the Ark base. However, I don't know if it's a mutation to turn a date into a mung bean, and I can only hum along with his murmurs. You're not steady, you're too floating. I hummed a lot, and old Lin too naturally recognized that I was just perfunctory. I don't know if it was because I was too excited or for some other reason, but suddenly he said something to me and stopped paying attention to me. I didn't care either. In a state of imminent combat, our spirits were highly tense. At this moment, the team completely stopped moving and was staring intently at a narrow east-west mountain ditch about 300 meters ahead of us. The vegetation in the mountain valley is dense, creating a lush scene. The Black Rose is crawling in the eastern section of the valley, while Tianjinhe is on the west side. They must have found something and kept silently communicating with Gung Tao through gestures and wireless transmission devices. I can naturally understand the gestures of my companions. They have discovered the traces of the giant mouse and its suspected hiding place in the ditch below, but the number is unknown. Moreover, there is a strong smell of decay in the mountain ditch, which is disgusting. Perhaps due to the direction of the wind, I did smell a foul odor, but it was not obvious. Gung Tao ordered to prepare for battle, and Master Mai and thugs had already begun to flank further east and west. I pressed down on Mr. Lin's shoulder, gesturing for him to stop talking nonsense and moving around. There was a cannibalistic rat in front of me, and the old man glared angrily at me, but he was also helpless. Two female doctors also slowly withdrew to my side. It seems that I have to take care of the three of them alone. I turned my puzzled gaze to Gung Tao, who also looked at me and made simple gestures, giving the order. As expected, I didn't need to participate in direct combat. My task was to take care of three non-combatants. I'll take care of them. Is it really time for me to become a nanny? Chapter 7 Encirclement and Suppression of Shuo Mouse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, as Master Mai and thugs twisted around, the air around us suddenly became tense, and all of us turned to Gung Tao. He adjusted the receiver in his hand and released an electronic flying bug. This flying insect is only the size of a fingernail and has a high-definition pinhole camera installed on its abdomen. This is not just a simple photography equipment, but also comes with automatic ranging, 3-dimensional target annotation, and simple perspective function. It has 360 degrees without dead angles, real-time image transmission, and is very practical for close-range complex terrain reconnaissance. The receiver in Gung Tao's hand is actually a relay converter, which can also directly command the path of flying insects. The images captured by flying insects are converted into military-specific ruler images through the receiver, and synchronously transmitted to each of our helmet imagers, which is very precise and efficient. This seemingly ordinary electronic flying insect is specifically designed for small groups of troops to engage in deep combat and has a significant impact. In addition, Gung Tao's tactical vest also has an equally sized offensive weapon called the Killer Bee. The Killer Bee can operate independently or in conjunction with electronic flying insects. After receiving target images, it memorizes the target's orientation and digital parameters on its own, and directly or periodically destroys the target according to instructions. It is a surgical knife-style pocket smart weapon. Gung Tao clearly does not intend to use the Killer Bee this time, based on tactical flexibility considerations. After all, we have deviated far from the original search area and carried very limited equipment. It is already afternoon, and if we have not completed the new search and rescue mission before the arrival of darkness, we are likely to spend the night in the wilderness. Night is the real challenge. In addition, he also has considerations for training his team. When we return to our home planet Earth, each of us needs to quickly adapt to her, otherwise even the minimum survival will be difficult to guarantee. In my left side mirror, a scene of a mountain ditch finally appeared, with something dark hidden beneath the dense and tall vegetation. Every clearly distinguishable black shadow has a coordinate ruler in the center, similar to a crosshair. The upper right corner of the mirror displays a dense collection of data, including the straight dot line distance, depression angle, and line distance between each black shadow and me. As the electronic flying insect changed its angle, a gray object the size of a backpack entered the picture, with scattered dark red spots next to it. I was surprised to cover my mouth, which should be a piece of human tissue. It's likely on my back or buttocks, with the same gray elastic protective suit attached to it as mine. I tried my best to control the urge to shout, looked up suddenly, pushed open the mirror, and saw that almost all my companions were following me in the same movement. Old Lin didn't know why, but suddenly my arm tightened and I was grabbed by this old guy again. I had no time to pay attention to him. After taking a deep breath, I tried to force myself to look back at the rearview mirror, only to find that the screen was black, just as I pulled down the mirror. Gung Tao reached out and made a forceful downward cut. The Maishifu at the far end of the east was the first to jump up and rush into the mountain ditch. Almost at the same time, the thug also jumped up. The sound of gunfire immediately rang out, and Master Mai was calm, but the speed of the Sigma Dragon tongue was so fast, proving that he was fatally attacked upon his appearance and forced to counterattack with all his might. On the west side, the sound of gunfire from the thug side also rang out, like a burst of beans. Almost in one breath, a barrage of bullets poured out, and Black Rose and Tian Jinha, who had been crawling and lying down, all appeared to shoot, and for a moment, the gunfire erupted. My hands were covered in sweat, and the barrel of the gun was aimed from east to west. There was no target appearing in the straight line. Suddenly, the rearview mirror went black, and my first reaction was that our electronic flying insects were probably gone. As a result, facing that damn mountain ditch, I became blind. Gung Tao had already rushed forward, followed closely by Yuan Ku, and all his companions were fighting. I was the only idle man huddled behind the earthen slope. A wave of hot blood kept pounding my chaotic brain, causing my nerves to tremble. The battle was so intense that I even heard the roar of the thugs and the shouting of the Master Mai. Finally, I couldn't stop lying down and had to fight and be with them. I gave Mr. Lin a hard pat on the shoulder, then jumped up, only to take 2 steps when I saw a big black guy jump out of the mountain ditch. This is an even larger rat, its back bleeding profusely, but this fool did not search for the person who hurt it. The pupils of its 2 small eyes were aimed at me, and then it bared its teeth, charging towards me like a wild boar going crazy. Ah Hua, pay attention, there are mutated mice that are leaking the net. Gung Tao's voice came from the earphones. I couldn't wait to answer, my mind was a bit confused. I didn't know if it was because the hot blood was cooling too quickly, or if the adrenal hormones were soaring high in an instant. Almost without aiming, I pulled the trigger at this big rat, duh. In a moment of panic, I actually hit very accurately. The giant mouse was shot one after another, but what was terrifying was that the speed of this big guy did not decrease at all. His 2 small eyes were staring crimson, and he rushed towards me in an instant. I can already smell the foul smell coming out of its mouth, and the angle of its mouth opening is beyond my imagination. My mind was blank, I didn't know whether to continue pulling the trigger, or to hit it with a stock, and even lost my ability to dodge. But by a stroke of fate, I don't know when my other hand had already pulled out the short knife from my waist and smoothly delivered it into the mouth of the giant mouse. Without the handle, it was only a few centimeters away, and its sharp teeth could crush my arm. However, I was still kicked out by the giant mouse's claws. The squeaking sound of the giant mouse stimulated my eardrums, mixed with the screams of women. As I tumbled, I fell far away and almost ran into the frightened old man Lin. Fear has completely occupied my mind, and I want to struggle to get up, but my hands and feet are not at my disposal. In my imagination, the huge mouse has already pounced on me, and with just one mouth, it can bite my throat. Suddenly, the surroundings quieted down, and I felt several big hands rubbing and pinching on me. I instinctively roared, but this further aroused the ferocity of several figures, pressing me to the ground. Ah Hua, calm down. Apart from scratching your skin, there are no other bleeding injuries. Don't worry, go to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. It was Gung Tao's voice, and I finally opened my extremely stubborn eyelids, which were tightly closed due to fear. Beside me were Master Mai and a female doctor named Daodu. They didn't mean to mock me, they were just helping me check and comforting me, because on the other side, there was also a guy shouting loudly, the voice of a thug, and more people were gathered around him. The thug was scratched by a dying giant mouse with blood stains and several scratch marks on his shoulder. This guy was afraid of contracting the mutated virus, sometimes saying he had a headache, sometimes saying he had a fever. Lao Lin and another female doctor were left exhausted by him, but still couldn't calm down. I think it's embarrassing. The thugs and I are one of the two tallest in our team. We fought with real guns and were actually scared into this kind of character. I don't mean to laugh at each other at 50 steps, we're both the same. Anyway, I'm too embarrassed to complain about Professor Lin anymore and dare not look up at Yuan Ku anymore. But Lao Lin gave me a thumbs up because he thought I had saved his life, and two beautiful doctors smiled at me like flowers, perhaps for the same reason. The Black Rose surprisingly took the initiative to greet me, saying that I was the only warrior among the team members to kill the mutated mouse with a cold weapon by hand. I was a bit confused, but couldn't explain my feelings at the time. I couldn't express my embarrassment, but I also deeply felt it. No matter how impressive my training was, I didn't experience it in real battles. Many of them were just superficial and superficial. In the midst of praise, especially with Gung Tao's affirmation of me, my mood improved a lot, and even I became complacent. Unconsciously, I kept reminiscing about the excitement of the stabbing, which had to be supplemented by my brain. But did I really have a strong and intense heart at that time? Chapter 8. Terrifying Images. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the scene in the mountain ditch was very tragic, with a total of 4 mutated mice. Master Mai and Black Rose worked together to kill one of them, and the one that mainly attacked the thugs was shot and jumped out of the ditch. In the end, I accidentally killed them. The other 2 were shot to death in the chaos, and their bullet holes were like a hornet's nest. Everyone's ammunition consumption is very high, and 4 big mice have taken out nearly 1/3 of our inventory. There is no way we can do it. This mutated mouse has too strong vitality, and it is impossible to die with 3 or 5 shots one by one. Unless one shot hits the head, it is difficult to do so in a close range, almost close to hand combat state. However, rigorous training has laid a solid foundation, and we at least did not harm our companions in the chaos, which cannot be achieved solely by good luck. The next task was a bit creepy. We discovered a cave resembling a mutated mouse, right next to the battlefield. Gung Tao believed that it was necessary to search for other companions in the cave, even if it was debris. There must be an explanation. The 7th team of 11 people couldn't have just these bones. Ordinary field mice have a habit of storing food, especially after autumn when they need to prepare for winter. After mutation, certain habits cannot be changed and are imprinted in DNA. Your grandmother's DNA, I cursed in my heart. Professor Lin was exaggerating, obviously agreeing with Gung Tao's ideas, but it was met with the disapproval of all of us. Moreover, he compared his comrades to food, which made it difficult for us to accept in our hearts. Why not use electronic flying insects to investigate first and determine if there are any survivors before making any plans? Master Mai's suggestion was reliable and indirectly agreed with Gung Tao. Gung Tao's eyes flashed with an imperceptible anomaly, perhaps no one else would notice except me. I suddenly remembered the missing drone and the electronic flying bug that suddenly fell off its chain before the battle. Even though it didn't seem obvious, it was still a very troublesome hidden danger. I don't know what potential enemies were watching around us. Gung Tao should be based on this concern. But he still followed the advice of Master Mai and released a new electronic flying insect into the eerie cave entrance. The cave was deep and very dark, and Gung Tao carefully controlled the receiver. The images were constantly transmitted, with smooth walls, a height of about 1.56 meters, and a width between 40 and 50 centimeters. This should be the entrance to the main tunnel. The flying insect advanced a little over 40 meters and encountered a four-way intersection. After a slight pause, it chose to fly to the right, which was far beyond our prediction. An underground mouse hole would be so huge and complex, and this is just a part of it. About 20 meters later, the flying insects quickly entered a relatively spacious space, with 4 or 5 square meters in all directions resembling a small hall. The black objects piled up in the space made us feel anxious and uneasy. Gung Tao hesitated a bit and adjusted the flying altitude and angle of the insects. The image became much clearer, and the worst-case scenario was presented before us. In the picture, there were 7 incomplete corpses, and most of the members of the 7th team were there. It's hard for me to describe how everyone felt at that time. The feeling of extreme anger and fear intertwined was the first time I experienced it in my life. The words that the crazy instructor said before we set off suddenly popped out of my head like a spell: "You're not going on an interstellar trip, and don't go to Earth with the idea of becoming a hero. This possibility doesn't exist at all. They don't believe me, but at least you need to be prepared to go to hell." The mad instructor suffered from illness due to these words, and later heard that he was also imprisoned for a few days. However, at that time, I was full of passion and did not take it to heart. However, today's bloody reality makes me want to curse that madman. At this moment, the mirror suddenly turned black again, and my brain seemed to be pricked by something sharp. I almost jumped up unconsciously. I couldn't explain why, but there was a very bad premonition. Wait a moment, the picture of the electronic flying insect entering the tunnel just now, and then inside, it was very spacious with a fork. Yes, the fork. Boss. Feeling both nervous and excited, I grabbed Gung Tao's arm and said, "What's that? Let's put it aside before we go in." The flying insects disappeared at the critical moment. Don't you think it's strange? Gung Tao was taken aback by me for a moment, but his face immediately became unnatural. Obviously, he was also thinking about the continuous incidents of electronic reconnaissance equipment. It must not be a coincidence, and he was even worried about the existence of some more terrifying enemies behind him, but he definitely did not have my sensitivity to the current danger. There's a fork in the road, there's a fork in the mouse hole. I was a bit incoherent and grabbed the old Lin who was still daydreaming next to me. "Professor Lin, how do field mice make their nests? You're quite professional. Hurry up." My abnormal emotions caught the attention of all my companions. Old Lin was a bit nervous when I pulled him, and he reached out to help his glasses on the bridge of his nose before slowly opening his mouth and saying, "The structure of the field mouse cave is quite complex, so complex that it can be called a system. It can be roughly divided into the earth mounds on the ground, the feeding passage, the main road for activities, the warehouse, the toilet pit, and the nest, etc. Also, there's more." I was very impatient. Since encountering the first big mouse, Mr. Lin has roughly told me about the habits of field mice. At that time, he followed me all the way and felt nervous. Although he was interested in listening, he didn't remember many things. Also, and generally, there are about 7 to 9 voles in a litter, but there are also a dozen or so. You can even reach 16 to 20 voles in a litter at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, said the old forest leader, as if he had realized something, and his expression suddenly became a bit scared. Moreover, these voles dig holes, and the underground area is very large, and they are also very good at living. They store food in several places. At this point, when Mr. Lin spoke, Gung Tao had already changed his color. Coincidentally, at this moment, a faint thumping sound could be heard from the mouse hole. He immediately ordered, "Step back, leave the hole." Seeing that Gung Tao was rarely nervous, the big guy didn't understand either. He followed orders and ran away, especially the thugs. His inner shadow remained stubborn. Although his reaction was a bit slow, he ran faster than anyone else. "Wait, we can't run like this," shouted Master Mai, who was extremely calm when facing difficulties. "In the wild, we can't run like this, big mouse." Gung Tao suddenly realized that at this moment, blindly escaping would be chased by the giant mouse from behind, tearing the fugitive to pieces. He quickly ordered, "Everyone jump onto the soil slope, organize crossfire, and prepare for battle. I blew up this rat hole." Black Rose gritted her teeth and immediately pulled out a high-explosive grenade from her tactical vest. "Obey orders and don't mess around." Gung Tao was extremely strict. The destructive power of high-explosive grenades is terrifying, and people do not have a clear understanding of the geological structure in the mountain valley area. Blindly detonating them can have great uncertainty, causing trouble in collapsing the entire cave passage. If a group of giant rats rush out in all directions, we will suffer catastrophic consequences. Moreover, Gung Tao's tactics are very clear. He concentrated his superior firepower and blocked a hole to attack. I think this is only a temporary emergency response and cannot be sustained because according to Lin Lao Tu, there are more than 1 or 2 holes in the Shuo mouse's nest, especially when our ammunition is limited. If we are trapped by this mutated animal, it is also difficult to escape misfortune. Chapter 9 Mutant Bat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. As soon as his companions took their positions, some had not yet stabilized their guns when a large rat rushed out of the hole. With Gung Tao's command to fire, he first pulled the trigger and surprisingly shot the rat in the left eye. Amidst its mournful screams, the unlucky rat's body twitched and its 4 paws spread wildly, but it still stubbornly rushed to the edge of the ditch and almost pounced. I even saw the thick fascia under its ribs when it stretched its wings, but it kicked its legs quickly. After falling off, it kicked its legs a few more times and stopped moving, possibly because a bullet had damaged its central nervous system. Gung Tao may not have the best marksmanship among us, but he was the first to take the lead and had a great momentum. Coupled with good luck, the result of killing the giant mouse with one shot greatly boosted morale. As the dense gunshots rang out, the second and third giant mice rushed out immediately. This time, everyone no longer had the good luck of Gung Tao. You wanted to aim at its left eye, but unfortunately couldn't hit it. Each giant mouse had to take at least 20 or 30 bullets to die, but there were still constant thumping noises inside the hole. How large a mouse nest should this be? If ammunition is consumed in this way, it will soon bottom out, and everyone will become nervous again. Gung Tao adjusted his tactics in a timely manner. Under his command, Master Mai and Black Rose each threw a high-explosive bomb, but only at the entrance. With 2 consecutive loud noises, at least 2 large rats that rushed nearby were torn into pieces by the high-explosive bomb. The momentum of the giant mouse's impact slowed down slightly, but only for a few breaths. The large triangular head of the mutated field mouse appeared again in the smoke-filled hole, and the sound of gunfire resumed. Look up. We couldn't breathe a sigh of relief as we were drawn to Tianjinha's loud roar. Looking up, I felt uneasy and didn't know what my companions were thinking. A few big birds appeared in the sky above the mountain ditch without warning. This was the first time we had seen animals flying on Earth since our search mission. Visually, the height of the flying birds is approximately 150 to 200 meters. Their flight speed is not fast, and they are not in a hurry to dive, but they are strangely circling around the mountain valley. I don't know what the problem is. Due to the relationship between smoke and light, it is difficult for the eyes to recognize the appearance of the big bird at this time, which makes it feel uneasy in the heart. Don't provoke them yet. Tian Jinhe remains vigilant and observes at any time. Everyone else concentrate their firepower. Gung Tao issued 2 orders in a row, with a very clear purpose of first eliminating the opponent in front of him. As for the big bird above his head, although the timing and trajectory of its appearance were strange, it was temporarily ignored without obvious hostility to avoid distracting his energy. Tian Jinhe withdrew from the battle and quickly took out several metal objects and a small square box from his backpack behind him. Inside were various strange parts. With his skillful splicing, a set of cool-looking mechanical crossbows was installed. Equipped with a rotating bracket and sight, with a large elevation angle, this is a powerful weapon for dealing with small moving targets in the air. Its lethality is limited, but its range is long, and the aiming head is excellent. It can automatically calibrate the target's orientation, making it an unexpected weapon in special operations. When Tian Jinhe was filling the crossbow and anchoring the direction, we killed 2 more large rats. The sound of the thumping in the cave suddenly eased, and even some sounds gradually faded away. The rats seemed to have retreated. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and when the gunshot stopped, no more giant rats emerged from the cave entrance. "I'll give it a damn," I grumbled exaggeratedly, flipping over and gasping for breath. The battle was too intense, and just now I almost had a close encounter with a big rat. Fortunately, the thug kept shooting and hitting this thing, otherwise my life would be in vain. But my happiness did not come from the death of the giant mouse, but from the fact that the thug had a divine aura at a critical moment. He was diagonally opposed to me, and in a moment of desperation, his marksmanship was surprisingly good, but bullets still whizzed past my head. I think if I were really close to 1.5 feet, I might not have been killed by the giant mouse, but was killed on the spot by the thug and became the first member of the group to die. I don't know if this is considered sacrifice. But it must have been accidental injury and carefully recorded in the search and rescue battle log, which is highly likely to become a typical negative textbook for future examples. The idea of not being able to see the light flashed through my mind. I was about to climb up to Mr. Lin and make a joke, but before I could get up, a black dot in my field of vision suddenly fell straight down, with a speed that seemed to exceed my understanding of gravitational acceleration. The black spot was the big bird hovering above my head, and my heart suddenly rose to my throat. As I turned my head to remind my companions, a continuous thud 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 thud. I cannot judge whether my companions' actions are correct. If I were to be replaced, I would probably have to do the same. However, what's important is that Gung Tao has not given any instructions so far. I believe it's not just me who saw the bird suddenly dive. I couldn't hear the sound of arrows breaking through my body, but the bird's body shook and its huge wings began to flutter wildly. Its shell-like body suddenly broke off and the kite spun and fell from mid-air. Based on intuition and visual perception, at least 2 feather arrows hit the hasty diving bird. However, as the strange bird quickly approached the ground, my spine suddenly trembled. This was not a bird, but a bat, a mutated bat with a wingspan exceeding 2 meters. Although my knowledge of biology is limited, I searched for the book Garden www.zhaozuiyuan.com. However, in the special training team, I learned about all the known ferocious animals on Earth. Although bats are not fierce, they are the only mammals that can fly, and there are many species, so they are also among the most familiar. Who made you fire? While the big bat was still struggling to death, Gung Tao's roar had already echoed through the vicinity of the mountain ditch. My heart pounded, and Tian Jinhe was also a bit confused. It seemed that this kid was nervous, but as the only scout in our team, his psychological resilience was indescribable, at least much stronger than mine. Because a large mutated field mouse appeared not far away, followed by another one. Obviously, this nest of mice had another exit nearby, and it was unknown whether they wanted to ambush us. However, these two large mice did not pay attention to us, but instead looked around vigilantly, turned their heads and burrowed into the haystack before disappearing. At this moment, the other two bats above my head had already turned back and flew towards their destination, seemingly indifferent to their companions, while I suddenly felt an ominous feeling. The huge bat finally stopped moving. The dust that had stirred up the sky before had not yet dissipated, and the point of fall was actually at least 50 meters away from us, but it was very close to where the giant mouse had just appeared. Through the eyepiece, I noticed that the big bat seemed to have not yet fully died. Its large, almost hairless wings occasionally shook, and its mouth opened and closed like a little pig, as if panting or calling, but we couldn't hear any sound. Its glass ball-like eyes made people look at its hair. Gung Tao's face turned pale, while my companions and I looked at each other, but no one dared to look at Tian Jinhe's expression at this moment. The bat suddenly dived, as if it was not coming towards us. Before I could even express my unlucky thoughts, Master Mike shouted again, "Look ahead." Chapter 10.2 Difficult Choices. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, everyone looked up one after another, and with just one glance, goosebumps appeared all over my body. A small black cloud appeared in the northeast direction of the sky, which was very abrupt in the gray sky. The dark cloud moved very fast, and the two bats that suddenly escaped flew towards that direction. It's over. At this moment, due to distance, it is impossible to see the essence of the dark clouds clearly, but anyone can guess that the dark clouds are a large group of bats. In terms of scale, it can be inferred that there are more than a few hundred. Boss, make up your mind quickly. The visual distance is less than 2 kilometers and it will be there in minutes. The usually calm Master Mike couldn't hold his breath anymore. If we let them rush down like wildfire, we really won't even have any bones left. Gung Tao remained silent, pushed aside his helmet mirror, and specifically took out an optical telescope from his backpack. After only a moment of contemplation, his face darkened a lot, but his tone of command remained calm. All personnel quickly tidy up their equipment and clear the robot's self-propelled vehicle. Just as everyone was silent and calming down, Gung Tao issued a second command, Tian Jinhe is still conducting forward reconnaissance. After 1 minute, everyone will enter the cave in sequence. Ah! Everyone, are you running into the mouse hole and throwing yourself into the trap? I would rather be vampired by bats. This was just my idea, but it was a moment of excitement. Upon reflection, I realized that the taste of being vampired by bats was also terrifying. In a state of confusion and panic, I couldn't question Gung Tao's orders. Yes, not just me, everyone is panicking. The steel willpower we have honed through arduous special training may not be as hard as the mud at this moment. In fact, we are already facing a very dangerous gamble. Entering the mouse hole is extremely risky. If we don't enter the mouse hole, we can resist or escape on the spot and die faster. Tian Jinhe. Gung Tao shouted loudly. Arrived. Tian Jinhe, who had been hanging his head in silence, jumped up in excitement from this thunderous shout. It was only then that I could see his face clearly. It was very pale, and there seemed to be tears in the corners of his eyes. He had been hanging his head in silence before, but in reality, he was suffering from self-blame and pain. Except for Gung Tao, no one has mentioned him, but no one has mentioned him. The invisible silence of most people has put tremendous psychological pressure on him. I feel a bit sad, but I don't know how to persuade or comfort him. Execute the order. Gung Tao drank again, without mentioning Tian Jinhe's unauthorized firing behavior just now. However, in such a high-risk situation, Tian Jinhe went out to investigate and basically tied his head to his waistband. I even suspected that this was a disguised punishment order. Without the commander's permission, opening fire without authorization is a violation of discipline, and it is a serious violation. In extreme cases, Gung Tao can shoot him on the spot, as if no one can fault this order. However, in the tense state of battle just now, it seems that the characterization of Tian Jinhe's behavior should not be hasty or arbitrary. To put it another way, it is difficult to say whether this behavior caused a major disaster, so I have reservations about this order. Of course, at critical moments, everyone was able to carry it clearly. However, after a brief moment of loss, Tian Jinhe had already adjusted his emotions and quickly organized his equipment. After a little observation, he jumped off the nearly 3-meter-high ravine with a swoosh. Companions also quickly took action, unable to say whether they were intimidated by Gung Tao's terrifying calmness or frightened by the mutated bat of Wuyang. It seemed that everyone was no longer afraid of the mouse hole. Allocating equipment and supplies, carrying away the rotting corpses of large rats, clearing the entrance to prepare for supporting Tian Jinhe, all of this was completed in just 1 minute, which was very efficient, but unfortunately it was a pity for the robot walking car. The robot is divided into 2 independent driving units. After activating automatic mode, it carries the corpse of a giant mouse and slowly moves away in 2 directions. The purpose is naturally to attract and distract the attention of bats in the sky. It is unknown whether it can work. Tian Jinhe had already entered the mouse hole, with the thug being the second, followed by Black Rose and Yuan Ku. Everyone distanced themselves because the hole was narrow and difficult to move in case of emergencies, so they had to keep some space between each other. According to Gung Tao's order, Master Mai issued an emergency notice to the base, the 2nd and 9th search teams, and requested that both search teams stop approaching us. As soon as the message was sent out, the dark clouds had already reached our heads, and the bats seemed to have not paid special attention to the distant machines walking around. The target was still us. Master Mai also carried his equipment and entered the rat hole. Next up was me, along with Mr. Lin and 2 doctors. Of course, my main task was still to take care of them. Since the start of the battle, there has been no time to talk to Lao Lin. He and 2 girls are lying in the pit behind us. Although they did not directly participate in the battle, they witnessed the entire process of the fight with their own eyes. It is estimated that the overly bloody scene scared them, and they remained silent until they entered the mouse hole. The mouse hole is not spacious and has a limited height, about 1.45 meters. Normal adults must have a cat's waist and head down to move forward. There is no odor or bloody smell inside the hole as imagined. Based on my previous understanding of mutated giant mice, this is not scientific. Unless there is good ventilation inside the hole, it is difficult to maintain such freshness. As I continued to move forward, the whizzing breeze proved my speculation. The deeper I went, the cooler it became. Not only was it well connected, but there were also many entrances and exits. This rat hole was not simple. Gung Tao personally stood behind us this time, and the distance between him and us remained between 3 to 5 meters. Based on this interval, our team had already stretched out a full distance of 4 to 50 meters. With such a long distance, how big should this winding underground mouse hole be? We have already detected a part of the mouse hole with electronic flying insects before, and we are not completely unaware. Looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, Tian Jinhe followed the path of the flying insects, but there has been no movement for so long, which is very abnormal. What's even more unusual is that at the entrance of the cave, it's actually very calm. In my opinion, bats are landing everywhere at the entrance of the cave, definitely to test their attack. Although their size is large, it mainly manifests on their wings. If they converge, it doesn't seem very difficult to squeeze into such a rat hole. Tian Jinhe, report the situation. Gung Tao's voice came from behind, making it difficult for him to analyze the cause of this abnormality. I have arrived at the granary, near the intersection of the second corridor inside the cave. Others. Boss, I'm right behind him. The voice of the thug came from the microphone. Tian Jinhe continued to explore forward, then encountered a fork in the road and retreated. The others stood still and waited. When the others were giving the report, I was pondering over Tian Jinhe. His voice had just been lowered quite low, and there seemed to be an indescribable trembling sound mixed in between, but he could be heard clearly. After a moment of thought, I understood that the so-called granary was the place where some of the bones of the 7th team's companions were piled up, which was previously captured by the electronic flying insect. I instantly felt an uncontrollable shiver in my heart. Mr. Lin, who was walking in front of me, seemed to hear something intermittently and suddenly stopped to look back at me. "Old man, what's going on? Don't stop." I dimmed the induction light on my helmet and found that the old man's face was ugly. I was a little puzzled, as he had never seen any footage taken by flying insects. Based on his previous dissection of a giant mouse, it seemed that he shouldn't have been frightened like this. "Give me a hand, my legs are weak." The old man panted heavily, as if he had something else to say, but ultimately chose to stare at me sideways.